Welcome to Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Hoarder Education. I am James Nalfos and I will be your moderator. I hope you enjoy listening to some of the excerpts of Hoarder Caribbean Classics. Do not hesitate to get a copy of your favorite Hoarder text. The book entitled The Sun's Eye was compiled by Anne Walmsley. This new edition has a range of poems and stories such as An Honest Thief. It includes a selection of Caribbean writing dating from the 1960s onwards. An Honest Thief is a short story written by a Barbadian author, Timothy Callender. Local landowner Selwyn Spencer owns a banana tree, which is his pride and joy. He takes immense pride in caring for this banana tree and treats it as serious business. He also has a reputation in the village as a bad man, and nobody dares to cross his path, particularly where the said banana tree is concerned. In fact, he adores the tree and its fruit so much he is willing to shoot anybody who tries to tamper with it. The story entitled An Honest Thief will be read by Mr. Kendel Hippolyte. Kendel Hippolyte is a poet and playwright and was a teacher of English language and literature for nearly 30 years. Reading has been the absolute center of all these activities. Reading, he says, helps him to understand the thoughts and feelings going on inside other people's head. He gets to live inside their heads and hearts for a time. This understanding brings him towards a deeper knowledge of himself. A deepening knowledge of self and others are absolutely necessary for writing poems and plays. The reading habit began early. By the age of 4 and at the age of 69, an interesting book is still nourishment and fun for the mind and heart. Have you ever read the short story entitled An Honest Thief? What are you waiting for?
Il est quick. An Honest Thief by Timothy Callender. Every village has a bad man of its own, and St. Victoria Village was no exception. It had Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer was a real bad man, and not even Big Joe would venture to cross his path. Besides, everybody knew that Mr. Spencer had a gun, and they knew that he had used it once or twice. Mr. Spencer did never go out of his way to interfere with anybody, but everybody knew what happened to anybody who was foolish enough to interfere with Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer had a reputation. Now, at the time I'm speaking of, every morning when Mr. Spencer got up, he made the sign of the cross, went and cleaned his teeth, and then left the house and went into the open yard to look at his banana tree. He had a lovely banana tree. Its trunk was beautiful and long and graceful, the leaves wide and shiny. And in the morning, with the dewdrops glistening silver on them, it seemed like something to worship. At least Mr. Spencer thought so. Mr. Spencer's wife used to say to him, but Selwyn, you like you bewitched or something. Every morning as God send, I see you out there looking up at that banana tree. What happened? Is you a woman or something? Don't tell me you're starting to go dotish. And Mr. Spencer would say, look, woman, mind your own business, eh? And if she was near him, she would collect a clout around her head too. So, one morning, Mrs. Spencer got vexed and said, you're going to have to choose between me and that blasted banana tree. Okay, you can pack up and go as soon as you please, Mrs. Spencer said. So, Mrs. Spencer went home to her mother. But, all said and done, Mrs. Spencer really loved her husband. So, after 2 days, She came back and begged for forgiveness. Mr. Spencer said, "Good. You have learned your lesson. You know now just where you stand." "Yes, Selwyn," Mr. Spencer said. "That is a good banana tree," Mr. Spencer said. "When them bananas ripe and you eat them, you will be glad I take such good care of that tree." "Yes, Selwyn," Mr. Spencer said. The banana tree thrived under Mr. Spencer's care. Its bunch of bananas grew and grew, and it became bigger and lovelier every day. Mr. Spencer said, "I can win first prize at any agricultural exhibition, you know, Ellie." "Yes, Selwyn," she said. And now, every morning, Mr. Spencer would jump out of bed the moment he woke and run outside to look at his banana tree. He would feel the bunch of bananas and murmur, "Yes, yeah, they really coming good. I'm going to give them a few more days." And he would say this every day. Monday morning, touched them, smiled, and said, "You really coming good. I'm going to give them a couple of days more." Tuesday morning, he smiled and said, "Couple of days more." Wednesday morning, and so on, and so on, and so on. Lovelier the bananas grew, the more Mrs. Spencer heard of them all through the day. Mr. Spencer would get up from his breakfast and say, I wonder if that tree all right, Ellie. Ellie, you think so? You better go and give a little water with the hose." Or he would wake up in the middle of the night and rouse his wife and say, "Hey, but Ellie, I wonder if that night temperature ain't too cold for that tree. Look, you better warm some water, put it to the roots, along with some manure. Go along right now." And Mrs. Spencer would have to obey. One morning, Mr. Spencer came in from the yard and said as usual, "Ellie girl, them bananas real lovely now. I think I'm going to pick them in a couple of days' time." "Always couple of days," she said, peeved. "Man, why you don't pick them now? Quick, before you lose them or something. You ain't even got no paling around the yard. Suppose somebody come in here one of these nights and thief them." "Thief which?" Mr. Spencer said. "Thief which? Thief which?" The truth was, nobody in the village would have dared to steal Mr. Spencer's bananas. For, as I've mentioned, he was a bad man. And one day, another bad man came to live in the village. He was the biggest and toughest man anybody had ever seen. He had long, hairy arms and a big, square head and a wide mouth. And his name was Bulldog. Everybody said, "One of these days, Bulldog and Mr. Spencer going clash. Yeah, too bad, man, can't live in the same village." And they told Mr. Spencer, "Bulldog will beat you." "Beat who? Beat who? Beat who?" Mr. Spencer said. He always repeated everything 3 times when he got indignant. And Bulldog said, "Who this Spencer is, show him to me." So one evening, they took Bulldog out by Mr. Spencer's. And he came up where Mr. Spencer was watering his tree, and he said, "Yo, is this Mr. Spencer?" "How'd that get your business?" Mr. Spencer asked. "Well, this is how. If you is the Spencer man, I can beat you." Bulldog always came straight to the point. Who say so? Who say so? Who say so? I say so. And me, I ask, who the hell you is? Mr. Spencer asked. Where you come from? You never hear about me? Bulldog said, surprised. Read any newspaper, the print since 1950, and you will see I always getting convicted for wounding with intent. I is a master at wounding with intent. I would wound you with intent as soon as I look at you. You want to taste my hand? Mr. Spencer didn't want to, however. He looked Bulldog up and down and said, well, I ain't denying you might stand up, to me for a few minutes. He paused for a moment, and then he said, but I bet you ain't got a banana tree like mine. He had Bulldog there. It was true, Bulldog had a banana tree, and seen alone, it was a very creditable banana tree. But besides Mr. Spencer's, it was a little warped relic of a banana tree. Bulldog said, "Mo, you got me there for truth." "There ain't nothing," Mr. Spencer said. "Look up them bananas." Bulldog looked. His eyes and mouth opened wide. He rubbed his eyes. He said, "Wait, them is real bananas?" "Mm-hmm," Mr. Spencer replied modestly. "Of course, still a bit young. So, if they seem a bit small." "Small?" Bulldog said. "Man, them is the biggest bananas I ever seen in my whole life. Let me taste one." One of which? One of which? One of which? Bulldog didn't like this. "Look, if you get too powerful with me, I bet you lost the whole damn bunch." "Me and you going to get in the ropes over them same bananas," Mr. Spencer said. "I can see that. And now get out of my yard before I wound you with intent, and with this same very chopper I got here." Bulldog left. But he vowed to taste one of Mr. Spencer's bananas if it was the last thing he ever did. Mrs. Spencer told her husband, "Don't go and bring yourself in any trouble with that jailbird. Give me a banana and settle it." "Not for hell," Mr. Spencer said. "If he want trouble, he come to the right place. Let me catch him round that banana tree. I waiting for he." "Good dear, pick the bananas and eat them all quick before he come back and thief them." "No," Mr. Spencer said. "I waiting for he. I waiting. Let him come and touch me. Just let him come to touch one of them. Just one, and you go see what he get." A few days passed. Bulldog had tried to forget Mr. Spencer's bananas, but he couldn't put them out of his mind. He did everything he could to rid his thoughts of that big, beautiful bunch of bananas which had tempted him that day in Mr. Spencer's yard. And then he began to dream about them. He talked about them in his sleep. He began to lose weight. And every day when he passed by Mr. Spencer's land, he would see Mr. Spencer watering the banana tree, or manuring it, or just looking at it. And the bananas would seem to wink at Bulldog and challenge him to come and touch one of them. One morning, Bulldog woke up and he said, "I can't stand it. I can't stand it no longer. I got to have one of them Mr. Spencer bananas today. Today, by the hook or by the crook. I will go and ask him right now." He got up and he went to Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer was in the yard, feeling the bananas. He was saying to himself, "Boy, these looking real good. I'm going to pick them tomorrow. Bulldog stood up at the edge of Mr. Spencer's land. He didn't want to offend him by trespassing. So he called out, Mr. Spencer, please, give me one of your bananas. Mr. Spencer turned around and saw him. He said, look, get out of my sight before I go and do something ignorant. And Bulldog said, this is your last chance. If I don't get a banana now, you're losing the whole bunch, yeah? But look at. Mr. Spencer was so mad he could scarcely talk. Now, Bulldog was a conscientious thief. He had certain moral scruples. He liked to give his victims a 50-50 chance. He said, are you going to thief your bananas tonight, Mr. Spencer? Don't say I didn't tell you. You're an idiot. Mr. Spencer called back. You're an idiot. Why you don't come? I got a rifle, and I will clap a shot in the seat of your pants, so help me. Anyhow, I going to thief your bananas, Bulldog said. I can't resist it no more. Come as soon as you're ready. Anything you get, you take. That is okay, Bulldog said. I'm taking all of them. Mr. Spencer pointed to a sign under the banana tree. It read, trespassers will be persecuted. And for you, persecuting means shooting. Bulldog said nothing more, but went home. A little later in the day, a little boy brought a message on a piece of notepaper to Mr. Spencer. It read, or you will thief your bananas between 6 o'clock tonight and 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mr. Spencer went inside and he cleaned his gun. Mrs. Spencer said, but look how two big men going to kill themselves over a bunch of bananas. Why you don't go and pick them bananas now? Make sure he can't get them. Woman, Mrs. Spencer replied, this is a matter of principle. I refuse to take the easy way out. Bulldog is a blasted robber, and he must be stopped. And I, Adolphus Selwyn Mackenzie Hezekiah Spencer, is the onlyest man to do it. Now, you go and boil some black coffee for me. I will have to drink it and keep awake tonight if I is to stand up for law and order. At 6 o'clock, Mr. Spencer sat down at his back door with his rifle propped upon the step and trained on the banana tree. He kept his eyes fixed there for the slightest sign of movement, and he didn't even blink. It was a lovely moonlight night. If he think I'm making sport, let him come. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and no sign of Bulldog. And Mr. Spencer hadn't taken his eyes off the banana tree once. In the moonlight, the tree stood there, lovely and still, and the bananas glistened. Mr. Spencer said, "They real good now. I'm going to pick them bananas tomorrow without fail." Mr. Spencer said, "Look, Selwyn, come let me go to bed. The man ain't a fool, he ain't coming." "Ain't 2 o'clock yet," Mr. Spencer said. And all the time, Mrs. Spencer kept him supplied with bread and black coffee. He took his food with one hand and disposed of it without ever taking his eyes off the tree. The other hand he kept on the gun, one finger on the trigger. He was determined not to take his eyes off that tree. 1 o'clock. No Bulldog. 1:30. No Bulldog. 1:45. No bulldog. Mrs. Spencer said, "Man ain't coming. Let me go to bed. It's 1:45 now." "We may as well wake now. Done, Mrs. Spencer said. 10:02. No bulldog. "Hell, this is a waste of my good time," Mr. Spencer said. 5:02. At 1:02, Mr. Spencer looked at his wristwatch to make sure, and he turned his head and he said to his wife, "But look how this damn vagabond make me waste with good time." And he looked back at the banana tree. He stared. His mouth opened wide. The banana tree stood there, empty. And the only indication that it had once proudly displayed its prized bunch of bananas was the little stream of juice that was dribbling down from the bare, broken stem. Quick.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Horder Education. For more of this titled and many others, visit hordereducation.co.uk. Stay tuned for our next episode. Please remain safe and set aside time to engage in reading. I am Jameson Alphonse, saying goodbye for now.